Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. It was supposed to be a normal day, one like any other. I had been married to James for over 12 years, and our life together had become comfortably routine. We had 2 children, a dog, a mortgage, and everything that most people would consider the markers of a good, stable life. Our house had its share of minor issues: leaky faucets, a few squeaky doors, and a furnace that hummed louder than it probably should. But nothing unusual, nothing that made me think twice about the repairman who would be coming to fix the boiler that morning. I had always thought of James as dependable, the kind of man who kept his word and provided for our family. He worked long hours, usually late into the evenings, but he was always home for dinner and took his role as a father seriously. But I couldn't help but feel that something had shifted in the past few months. He was more distant as smile. Didn't reach his eyes the way it used to. We hardly talked about anything deeper than the weather or the kids' school activities. Maybe it was just me being overly sensitive, but there were moments when I found myself questioning the quiet distance between us. The affectionate touches had become rare, and the laughter that had once filled our house was now a faint echo. I chalked it up to the pressures of life-work stress, parenting fatigue, and the monotony of day-to-day routines. That morning I had woken up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. I saw the message: boiler repair scheduled for 10 a.m. today. I didn't think much of it, simply glad that we'd finally get the heating issue resolved before the cold snap hit. As I made breakfast for the kids, I noticed James was already dressed in his work clothes, his tie a little looser than usual, his eyes already glazed over like he had something else on his mind. "You working from home today?" I asked, trying to make small talk while flipping pancakes. "Yeah, some calls, meetings." "Nothing big," he replied, his voice distant. He was already scrolling through his phone, absorbed in whatever was on the screen, not meeting my gaze. "All right," I said, sensing the gap between us widening even more. "The repairman should be here any minute." "Good," he muttered, not looking up. Before grabbing his coffee and heading out the door to the study, I went about my usual morning routine. Getting the kids ready for school, making sure they had their lunches packed, and brushing the dog's fur. By the time I walked back into the kitchen, I was surprised to see the repairman standing at the door. He was an older man, maybe in his early 50s, with thick glasses and a warm smile. His name was Bill, and he had worked with the local heating company for years. Mrs. Carter, right? "Ready for the boiler check?" he asked, looking at the list in his hand. "Yes, that's right." "Come on in," I replied, opening the door for him. We walked to the basement where the boiler was located. Bill got to work quickly, explaining what he was doing and asking about the issues we had been having. I explained the strange humming sound the furnace had been making lately, as well as the inconsistent heating throughout the house. He nodded, pulling out his tools and checking the unit with experienced hands. While he worked, I found myself glancing at the clock. James had been in his study for what felt like an eternity, barely making an appearance. The kids were ready for school, so I decided to run upstairs to check on them. "Everything good down there?" I asked, peering into the basement as I stood at the top of the stairs. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just a few things to tighten up, and we'll be all set," Bill called back, his voice carrying up the staircase. I smiled and nodded, heading back to my room. As I passed by James' study, I paused, wondering if I should check in, but something stopped me. Maybe it was my intuition telling me I didn't want to face whatever was brewing between us. Instead, I grabbed a book and sat on the couch, trying to distract myself. Minutes passed, and I heard Bill moving around downstairs, the clanging of tools on metal ringing in the air. I was almost relieved that the repair was nearing its end. I had a million things to do, and I didn't want to waste more time. But then something unexpected happened. Bill came upstairs, wiping his hands on a rag. He had a serious look on his face, and his voice had a strange edge to it as he approached me in the living room. "Mrs. Carter, I need to speak with you about something," he said, his expression hardening. I froze, confusion creeping up my spine. What's wrong? I asked, standing up. I don't know how to put this. Bill hesitated, looking around as if checking to make sure no one else was around. But I feel it's important that you know. Your husband isn't the man you think he is. I blinked, my stomach dropping. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Bill hesitated again, his eyes starting to the door, his voice lowered. I don't want to get in trouble, but I've seen him before, and I know he's been seeing someone else. I've seen them together. A woman in his car at the park. It's been going on for months now. My heart stopped. The words didn't make sense, not at first. My mind raced, trying to process the impossible. This was a joke, some kind of mistake. But Bill's face was full of sincerity, and the weight of his gaze told me he wasn't lying. How do you know this? I asked, my voice trembling. I've been working with your husband for a while now on some repairs at his office. I've seen him meet her on several occasions. I didn't want to get involved, but after all the signs I've seen, I couldn't just ignore it any longer. I'm sorry, Bill said, his tone full of guilt. I couldn't breathe. The world around me felt like it was spinning. The calm, predictable life I had built with James, the man I trusted with everything, was crumbling right before my eyes. Before I could even respond, I heard footsteps behind me. It was James, standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with surprise. Bill, what's going on? He asked, his voice laced with tension. Bill looked at him for a moment, then sighed. I told her, James. I told her everything. She deserves to know. I turned to James, my heart pounding in my chest. Is it true? Have you been seeing someone else? Have you been lying to me all this time? I demanded, my voice shaking with emotion. James stood frozen for a moment, his face going pale. He looked like he was trying to come up with something, some excuse, some justification, but all that came out was a weak, I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to hurt you either, I said, my voice breaking. But you've shattered everything we've built. For a long, agonizing moment, there was nothing but silence. Then James took a step forward, his hand trembling. I'm sorry, Lauren. I never meant for it to go this far. But no, don't. I interrupted, holding up my hand. Don't even try. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family. And I can't just pretend like everything's okay anymore. The words hit harder than anything I had ever imagined. The realization that the man I had loved, the man I thought I knew, had been living a secret life for months, was almost too much to bear. With a shaky breath, I turned to Bill, who was still standing there, his face filled with regret. Thank you, I said softly, the tears welling up in my eyes. Thank you for telling me the truth. I needed to hear it. Bill nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. I never wanted to be the bearer of bad news, he said. But sometimes the truth is the only thing that can set you free. As he left the house, I stood there in the silence, the weight of everything crashing down on me. James hadn't followed Bill out, but instead was still standing in the doorway, his eyes pleading for some kind of forgiveness. I couldn't look at him. Not yet. I had to process everything. The betrayal, the lies, the broken trust. All I could think about was how, for months, I'd been living a life that wasn't real. The comfort, the routine, it had all been an illusion. I need space. I said, my voice barely audible. I need to think. James didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me with the same regretful eyes. I couldn't stay there any longer, not with him in that house. My life, our life, had just crumbled to dust, and all I could do was walk away. Unsure of what came next, but knowing I couldn't face the life I had once believed in. It was gone. And nothing would ever be the same again. The truth had been whispered. And in that whisper, everything had changed. The days following the confrontation were a blur of confusion, anger, and disbelief. I had never imagined that something as simple as a boiler repair would set off such a catastrophic chain of events. I stayed in the guest bedroom for several nights, the house suddenly feeling cold and empty. James had tried to apologize, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. How could I? How could I look at the man who had promised to love and cherish me, only to learn that he had been living a lie for months, maybe longer? I avoided him as much as I could. I knew he was still in the house moving about like a ghost in his own home, but I couldn't face him. His presence was suffocating, and every time I thought of the betrayal, it felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. I had gone over every moment in our relationship, every sign I had ignored, every hint I had brushed aside. I began to wonder how long he'd been deceiving me. Had it started years ago? Or was it more recent when he began pulling away emotionally, retreating into himself? Had I missed the warning signs? The guilt started to creep in too. I kept asking myself, was there something I did wrong? Was I too busy with the kids, too distracted by life to notice his unhappiness? My mind raced with questions, but no answers seemed to satisfy the emptiness that had suddenly engulfed me. On the fourth day after the confrontation, James asked if we could talk. I hadn't spoken to him much since that fateful moment with Bill, and I didn't want to, but I knew that avoiding the conversation wouldn't help either of us. Reluctantly, I agreed. I asked him to meet me at the park, a neutral ground where we could speak without the heavy weight of our home hanging over us. As I waited for him by the park bench, I watched the kids play in the distance, laughing without a care in the world. Their joy was a sharp contrast to the storm swirling in my chest. I wondered if they could sense the tension in our home, the subtle cracks in the foundation that had once seemed so secure. James arrived a few minutes later, his posture slouched, his hands shoved in his pockets. He looked smaller, almost unrecognizable, as if the person I once knew had evaporated, leaving behind only the remnants of a man who was trying to make sense of his own actions. "Thank you for meeting me," he said softly, standing a few feet away from me, his voice full of hesitancy. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a vulnerability I wasn't used to seeing. For a moment, I almost felt pity for him, but it was quickly overtaken by the anger I had been holding back. "James, I don't know what you expect me to say," I began, my voice cold. "You've shattered everything we had. Everything I thought was real. You lied to me, and for months, I had no idea. How could you do this to me? To our family?" He winced as though the words physically hurt him. "Lauren, I never meant for this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you what was going on inside my head. I've been so lost and I don't know how to fix it now." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow. "You didn't know how to tell me? You didn't think about the consequences when you started seeing her? When you lied to my face every single day?" He shook his head, his eyes welling up with emotion. "I don't have an excuse, I know that. I messed up. I hurt you and I hate myself for it. I never wanted to betray you. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who I was. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore, Lauren. I thought maybe it was just a phase and it would pass." I crossed my arms tightly, trying to hold on to whatever semblance of control I had left. "A phase?" I echoed, my voice rising. "You've been seeing another woman for months, and you think that's just a phase? Do you even understand how much you've hurt me? How much you've hurt our kids?" "I do understand, Lauren," James replied, his voice breaking. "I know I've destroyed everything. I wish I could go back and fix it, but I can't. All I can do now is ask for your forgiveness, even though I don't deserve it." I stood there, staring at him, the weight of his words hanging in the air between us. The bitterness in my chest gnawed at me, but there was something else there too, something I hadn't expected. Exhaustion. I was so tired of carrying this pain, so tired of holding on to anger that didn't seem to make anything better. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if I could ever forgive him. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I even wanted to. "I can't just forgive you, James. I can't forget what you've done." But I hesitated, my words heavy. "But I need space. I need time to figure out what I want. And I don't think I can do that while you're still here." His face fell, the weight of my words clearly hitting him harder than any of the harsh things I had said. "You want me to leave?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Yes. I don't know for how long, but I need time away from you. I need to be alone to think about everything, to understand what's next. I can't live like this anymore, James." There was a long silence as he processed my request. He nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. "I understand, I'll go. But please, know this. I will always love you, Lauren. I'm so sorry. If there is any chance for us to fix this, I'll do whatever it takes." I didn't say anything for a while, just letting his words settle in the air. When I finally spoke, my voice was quieter, more composed. "I don't know what the future holds, James. I don't know if we'll ever be able to fix this. But right now, I need you to leave." And with that, he turned away, walking toward his car, his steps slow and deliberate. I stood there watching him leave, and I wondered if I had made the right decision. Could we ever fix what had been broken? Could I ever trust him again? The next few weeks were an emotional roller coaster. James stayed with a friend for a while, giving me the space I had asked for. The house was quieter without him, but it wasn't the peaceful quiet I had hoped for. It was the kind of silence that filled you with questions, with doubt, with uncertainty. I began seeing a therapist, trying to unpack the weight of what had happened and where I went from here. Slowly, I started to realize that while James had made the choice to betray me, the power to move forward, whether with him or without him, was still in my hands. I had the right to decide my own path. I wasn't just the victim of his choices. I was also the author of my own story. James called me frequently, sometimes apologizing, sometimes crying, and sometimes just asking if we could need to talk. I always turned him down. I wasn't ready to listen to his apologies yet. I needed time. Time to heal. Time to figure out who I was without him. Who I was without the life we had built together. Finally, a month later, I agreed to meet him for coffee, but only because I needed to know if there was any chance for us to rebuild, even if that meant starting from scratch. But when we sat across from each other at that coffee shop, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't uncomfortable either. It was just real. James looked different now. He was no longer the man who had betrayed me. There was a vulnerability to him, a transparency that hadn't been there before. "I can't promise you anything," I said softly, looking into his eyes. "But I'm willing to try, James, for us, for our family, but it's going to take time. It's going to take trust." He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I'll wait, Lauren, however long it takes." In that moment, I realized that while forgiveness was not immediate, it was possible. It wasn't about erasing the past or pretending it hadn't happened. It was about understanding that healing takes time. It was about finding the strength to choose a new path, together or apart. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever the future held, I knew that I had the power to shape it. And that in itself was a form of freedom. After that coffee meeting with James, I found myself at a crossroads. The weeks following our conversation were some of the hardest I had ever experienced. It was as if the earth had shifted beneath my feet, and I was left scrambling to regain my balance. I kept thinking about what James had said that he would wait for me, but I had no idea how long it would take to rebuild the trust he had shattered. And the question remained, was I even capable of forgiving him, or was it better to let go of the life we had once shared? The kids noticed the change. They were too young to fully understand what had happened, but they knew something was wrong. They asked questions I wasn't ready to answer, like why Daddy wasn't coming home at night or why he wasn't at the dinner table. It broke my heart every time they asked, but I didn't know how to explain. How could I tell them that their father, this man who had always been there, who had been the stable presence in our home, had betrayed me? One evening, after tucking the kids into bed, I sat in the living room, staring at the wall, consumed by the silence. I thought about the life James and I had built, the plans we had made, the dreams we had shared. How had we gotten here? What had I missed? Was I so caught up in our routine that I had failed to notice the cracks beneath the surface? In those quiet moments, I began to realize something important. I wasn't just angry at James for what he had done. I was angry at myself for ignoring my own feelings, for silencing the voice inside me that had sensed something was wrong. I had put so much energy into being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, that I had neglected myself. I had let my own needs and desires fade into the background. And in doing so, I had allowed a toxic silence to grow between James and me. I need an appointment with a therapist to help me sort through the mess of emotions I was experiencing. I needed someone to guide me through this, someone who could help me find clarity in the chaos. I knew I couldn't do it alone. In therapy, I started to unpack all the layers of grief, betrayal, and self-doubt. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the life I'd allowed to slip away. The relationship that had become so numb, so routine, that we had both lost sight of what made us who we were as individuals and as a couple. As the weeks wore on, I began to make small changes. I started taking time for myself again. I enrolled in a yoga class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. I began reading books for pleasure, something I had abandoned long ago. I even started writing in a journal, capturing my thoughts and feelings as they came, without judgment or shame. For the first time in years, I was learning to be present. In my own life, James, on the other hand, was doing everything he could to prove that he was sorry. He called me every day, asking how I was doing, apologizing again and again. He sent flowers, wrote letters, and even started attending therapy. Himself. It was clear he was remorseful, but I still couldn't fully believe in his sincerity. How could I? How could I trust him again after everything he had done? Despite his efforts, there were moments when I questioned whether I could ever truly forgive him. Every time he called or showed up at the house, a part of me wanted to shut the door and walk away, to never see him again. But then another part of me, the part that had once loved him deeply, wondered if there was a way to move forward. Was it possible to rebuild the love we had lost? Was it worth trying, or was I just fooling myself? One day I decided to visit our old home, our family home where we had lived together for so many years. It had been months since James moved out, and I needed to see it one last time. The place where we had made so many memories, both good and bad. I stood in the front yard, staring at the house, my heart heavy with emotion. It felt so strange to be there without him, to realize that the place I once called home was now just a shell of what it had been. I walked inside, the echo of my footsteps on the hardwood floors feeling like a painful reminder of the past. Everything was so still, so empty. I wandered through the rooms, touching the walls, running my fingers over the surfaces that had once been filled with life and laughter. In the kitchen, I found an old photo of the four of us, James, the kids, and me, taken just a few years ago. We looked so happy, so full of promise. And yet, now that image felt like a distant memory dot as I stood there, lost in thought. I heard a knock on the door. I froze for a moment, not expecting anyone, but when I opened it, I was shocked to find James standing on the other side. His face was pale, his eyes wide with worry. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I wasn't sure if you'd be here," he said, his voice soft, almost tentative. "I needed to see it again," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. I wasn't sure what I was feeling at that moment, anger, sadness, maybe even a bit of relief. But I knew I needed this moment, needed to face the reality of what we had lost. We stood there for a few moments, just looking around the house. It felt both familiar and foreign at the same time. James was the first to speak, his voice quiet but full of emotion. "I never wanted to hurt you, Lauren. I can't take back what I did, but I want you to know that I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I love you. I've always loved you." I was just too lost to see it. I looked at him, the weight of his words hanging in the air. My heart ached, torn between the love I had for him and the betrayal I could never forget. "I don't know if I can forgive you, James," I whispered, the tears finally coming to my eyes. I don't know if I can ever forget what you did. He nodded, his expression pained. I understand. I need you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be the man you deserve. We stood there in silence, the moment stretching out between us. I didn't have the answers, and neither did he. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were facing this together, no longer pretending, no longer hiding from the truth. I can't promise anything, I said, my voice steady but filled with uncertainty. But I'm willing to try. I don't know what that looks like or if it's even possible, but I think we owe it to ourselves to at least try. James stepped forward, his eyes filled with gratitude. That's all I ask, Lauren. That's all I've ever wanted. And in that moment, I realized something important. It wasn't about pretending the past never happened. It wasn't about erasing the pain or the betrayal. It was about moving forward, about rebuilding the pieces of our broken relationship with honesty, patience, and time. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt like there was a glimmer of hope. I wasn't sure where this journey would take us, or if it would even work out in the end. But for the first time, I was open to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal. Together, as James and I left the house that day, walking side by side for the first time in what felt like forever, I knew that this was only the beginning. The pain, the wounds would take time to heal. But with each step forward, we were choosing to face the future, not as we once were, but as we could be. And that in itself was a new kind of freedom.